All right, let's talk about hypnosis. And I mean really talk about it. Not the way you've seen in the movies, with the swinging watches and all that mysterious trance stuff. No, today we're going to look right under the hood. We're going to uncover the hidden mechanics, the actual engineering of the mind. So what is hypnosis really? I mean, is it some special state of mind, a personality trait, or, some kind of weird magic? For decades, the explanations have been, well, let's just say they've been pretty fuzzy. But what if the answer has nothing to do with psychology at all? What if it's all about structure? Okay, so let's start with what the source material for this explainer calls the old story. This is basically the common understanding, right? The usual suspects that get rounded up whenever anyone tries to explain what's actually going on.
Yeah, you know all these words, right? Trance, suggestibility, relaxation, focused attention. I mean, they all sound about right. But here's the thing. There's a huge problem. These words only describe what hypnosis looks like from the outside. They don't tell us a thing about the engine that's actually running the show.
Exactly. These are just labels for the effects. They're not explanations for the cause. It's kind of like describing a car by just saying it moves, but never ever mentioning the engine. So to really get what's happening here, we need a completely new way of looking at it. And believe me, this new frame is a total game changer. Just listen to this. Hypnosis is the predictable behavior of a cognitive architecture under directed load. Now just notice that language for a second. That doesn't sound like psychology, does it? Nope. It sounds like engineering. And that one idea right there completely reframes the entire topic. It's the key to everything we're about to dive into. So let's really explore that idea, right? The mind as an architecture. This is our new blueprint. We're throwing out those vague ideas about personality, and instead, we're looking at a model made of structures, pathways, and pressure. And this really highlights a fundamental shift. See, the old view, it often implied some kind of character flaw, didn't it? It used words like suggestibility or even weak-mindedness. Well, this new view, it rejects that completely. Instead, it talks about structural responsiveness. A person responds not because they're weak, but because the actual architecture of their mind is compatible with the process. It's about fit, not flaws. Okay, so if we're going to think like engineers, we're going to need a toolkit, right? Well, this new model gives us a few core concepts. These are the building blocks we need to understand exactly how this whole architecture works.
First up, we have a concept called topology. Now, don't let the word scare you. It's basically just the layout of the system. The best way to think about it is like the mind's floor plan. It defines all the possible pathways, all the hallways your thoughts and awareness can travel down at any given moment.
Next, we've got load. And listen, this one is absolutely crucial. And I want to be super clear, we are not talking about emotional stress here. Not at all. This is a directed structural demand. It's the specific pressure that gets applied to the pathways of the architecture to guide it. This is the force that actually makes things happen.
And finally, there's coherence. This is all about how stable the system is. The easiest way to picture it is like a dial that controls how pliable the architecture is. Is it super rigid like a brick wall, or is it flexible? Coherence is what determines whether that load we just talked about will have any effect.
And it turns out that dial has a sweet spot. If the coherence is cranked way up, the system is like that brick wall. It just resists everything. But if it's too low, it's just chaotic, like a sandcastle in the wind. It just falls apart. No, the magic happens right there in the middle, at medium coherence. That's where the architecture is pliable enough to be reshaped, but still stable enough that it doesn't just collapse.
Okay, so now we have our building blocks: topology, load, and coherence. So let's see how this whole architecture actually behaves when you put it under pressure. This is where we connect all this theory to the real-world stuff we actually associate with hypnosis. So the main effect here is something called identity compression. I want you to go back to that mental floor plan we talked about, the topology, with all its hundreds of hallways and rooms. A hypnotic process applies load in a way that systematically closes off the doors, one by one, until you're left in just a single, narrow hallway. You've literally gone from having many potential paths down to just one. And that structural narrowing, that is what directly produces all those classic hypnotic phenomena. You see a rigid arm? That's just the system compressing down into a single command, be rigid. Amnesia? Well, the pathway to that memory has just been temporarily closed off. See, it's not magic. It's the predictable outcome of a system that has been temporarily simplified.
So just to be crystal clear here, we are not talking about some kind of mystical trance. What we're actually talking about is a temporary structural narrowing of the available cognitive pathways. The behavior becomes more predictable for a really simple reason. The system just has fewer options available to it.
Now, what's really fascinating is that different architectures handle this load in different ways, all based on their pre-existing structure. So, for example, a compliance-dominant architecture. It'll just collapse inward and follow directions. But a disassociation-dominant one, that might produce some really vivid hallucinations. This is what explains why people have such different responses. It's all about how each unique structure handles that incoming load. So, have you ever wondered why hypnotic effects feel so sudden and automatic? Well, it's all about thresholds. The load pushes the system right up to its boundary, its breaking point. And when that threshold is finally crossed, the entire configuration just snaps into a new state. It feels instantaneous and involuntary because, from a structural point of view, it is.
All right, so as we start to pull all these pieces together, you can see the new picture that emerges, right? Hypnosis is transformed from this mysterious art form into a predictable set of mechanics. It's all about understanding the blueprint of the mind and knowing how to work with it.
And this brings us to a really important point: why the word suggestion is actually the wrong word to use. See, suggestion implies choice or persuasion, but this model isn't about persuading someone. It's about what's called structural elicitation. You aren't suggesting a change. You are actively placing load, shaping the architecture, and activating thresholds to cause a change. It's way more direct.
So let's just recap the core principles here, the big takeaways. 1. Hypnosis is engineering, not psychology. 2. The topology of the mind narrows to reduce your options. 3. Coherence is adjusted to allow for change. 4. Load is what directs the outcome. 5. Thresholds are what create those sudden automatic effects. And maybe the most important of all, how you respond is about your architecture, not your personality.
Which brings us back full circle to a slightly refined and maybe the most precise final definition yet. Hypnosis is the structural behavior of cognitive architecture under guided deformation. It's just elegant, right? It's mechanical, and it completely removes all the mystery, leaving behind nothing but a clear, workable process.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. I mean, if a state as profound as hypnosis is really just a matter of cognitive engineering, then what else in your mind can be engineered? What other beliefs, what other behaviors are just architectures waiting for a brand new blueprint?